Campbell.
Her name is not very common.
Oh.
Oh, ouch.
Starts to go. Roll call, please.
Okay. Directors Sethy,
Here.
Akbari,
Here.
Gunther,
Here.
Huang,
Here.
and Weed.
Here. Director Sethy, please lead us in the pledge. Yes.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we have public comments for items that are not on our agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board this evening? Thank you, sir.
General Manager, staff. My name is Mike Aziz. I'm the Senior Business Representative for Public Employee Division of Operating Engineering Local 3. I represent your employees and our members of that tonight. I wanted to come tonight a couple of reasons. I want to introduce myself, first of all, because I've been here for a little while now, about a year. You might have seen me walking around the hall, wondering who the heck is this guy walking around the hall, why is he here? Now you know why I'm here. Another couple things I want to talk about is it's the end of the year. In most places, kind of do a review at the end of the year. I'm no different. So the district has had an interesting year this year. A couple things I really wanted to point out is you actually had the opportunity to evaluate yourself. You hired a consultant, Kaufman Associates. That's a hard thing to do, to have someone come in and look at you and tell you, hey, these could be some issues. And they did. You know, they found some things, and they made some recommendations. And I know the board is looking to implement some things, try to streamline, make things right. That's a good thing. You know, and we know it's going to take some time. It's a work in progress. You know, so we'll surely see this in 2018. Second thing we had to go through is rate increase. Being a public entity, that's a huge endeavor. I don't have to tell you. You sit up here. You've heard people coming and talking to me. But I want to make sure that everybody was aware that our organization had communication with the general manager and offered assistance. In fact, myself and another business rep went to the city council meeting in Fremont in support of the district's position. And we actually came to the meeting and I think we all voted on that in support of the position. So we went through it, we got through that. That's a tough thing. And I appreciate the work and the things you had to listen to. Not easy. So now, moving forward, 2018, it's going to be a good year, I think. You know, the economy is doing really well. I think the district is trying to put itself in a position to move forward. We have a lot of work to do. And another thing, I'm really big in communication. I think that we need to talk, and not to assume anything, but we do have a monthly meeting scheduled with your HR department to try to talk about things. I think we make good progress. We don't always agree on everything. We don't have to, but we have to talk. And that's a huge thing. You know, I have an open policy. Anytime anybody on the board wants to talk, the general manager, HR, I will make the time to talk with you all. And these folks out here, a lot of them are your constituents. Their family members are your constituents. You're elected folks. So they're always watching every word you say, everything you do. Just like me, everything I do. They're not shy telling me when I'm going off the path. And I guarantee you that your constituents are not going to be shy and letting you know that they feel that way also. But I know, like I said, you know, we've gone through a lot of stuff this year. The district's gone through a lot of stuff. We're all trying to work together. I'm a firm believer of communication. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to let you know that we're here to support you through the rate increase, and we're still here to support you all right now. But we need to make sure that we're good communications on there. In fact, I think this is the last board meeting of the year, so I want to make sure that I wasn't amiss and wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And make sure you guys are safe on the retired law enforcement. Don't get in trouble. You know, let's all make sure we get to 2018, January 1st, and beyond. We've got a lot of work to do. And we're looking forward to working with you guys and everything done this year. All right? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And thank the boys to come to our meetings. It gets lonely up here sometimes. Next, if there's any other public comment? There being none, we'll close the public comment section and move to the consent calendar. Is there a request to add items to the consent calendar or remove?
Mr. President, I suggest that we do not add item 5.7 to the consent calendar.
So, do we have a motion for,
I will make a motion to add items 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, 5.8, and 5.9 to the consent calendar, please.
I'll second.
second,
Okay.
roll call?
Sure. Directors Sethy,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye. Now, do you have a motion to adopt the consent calendar as amended?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Directors Sethy,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye. Next is item 5.
Would you like to go to 5.1?
1, which is reorganization. We can start that early and then you conduct the meeting. So, the reorganization is under item 5.1, which is find my written agenda.
Would you like me to cover it?
Yes, please.
So item 5.1 involves reorganization of the Board of Directors. California Code Section 30520 provide that directors shall, 1, elect one of their number president, and 2, may elect one of their number vice president. Pursuant to Section 2.2 of the Board Rules and Code of Conduct and Resolution 1871, adopted December 10, 1970, this election is typically held at the first regular meeting in December each year. The directors who are elected president and vice president assume office at the close of the meeting at which they are elected. And the board typically cycles through officers, and staff has provided that information of past history to you previously. So the recommendation this evening is by motion, adopt resolutions electing 1, a president, and 2, vice president of the board.
We have a nomination for president.
I will nominate Director Sethy as the president, please.
I'll second.
Well, nominations really don't need a second, which is interesting in the real rules, but it's a good practice. Do
Can
we
I-
have any other nominations? There being none, roll call, please.
Okay. Directors.
You do actually need a motion and a second to actually elect your president. You don't need a second for a nomination, but to actually appoint, you should have a motion.
Then I will make a
Thank you,
motion
counsel.
Thank you.
to elect Director Sethy as the president.
I'll second that one.
Okay.
Not another nomination, roll call, please.
Okay. Director Sethy,
Embarrassingly, I will say aye for myself.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye. Next, we have a nomination for vice president.
I will make a nomination, a motion for nominating Director Gunther as Vice President of the Board.
And I will second that motion.
There's a motion. Do we have any?
Well, is that a nomination or is that a motion?
Actually,
Motion.
ideally, you should start with nomination and a motion, but in this case, I think we can do the
Motion to
shortcut. So we have a motion on the floor. With there no other nominations, roll call, please.
Okay. Directors Sethy,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye. The practice is to have the board president conduct the meeting and at the end, hand the gavel to the incoming president. So,
5.2, I can cover
You want
it.
to show off that gavel? It's over 100 years old.
Do you want to do a photo op?
well, we can do that to you.
Okay.
This is a gavel from our original board when it was formed in 1914. First and oldest county water district in California.
I think the directors were bigger back then. I don't know.
More influential.
5.2?
Yes. The 5 point, was on our, okay, 5.2 is to adopt the 2018 calendar of regular meetings and board workshops. Is there any comment or questions on the document that was provided to you earlier?
Okay, so the recommendation is by motion, adopt the proposed 2018 calendar of regular board meetings and board workshops of the Board of Directors.
Being said,
I'll move the
do we have a
staff
motion?
I'll second.
I'll move then. I'll let you accept your second.
Director Gunther.
Take a motion. Okay.
Voice
It's been
is
moved by
locked
Director
tonight.
Gunther.
So Director Gunther moved, seconded.
All right.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Okay. Director Sethy,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye.
And just to keep things straight, I think we should cover 5-7 so that we can roll through.
Okay.
And for item 5-7, Director Akbari, would you like to make a statement?
Sure. Well, I'll recuse myself for item 5.7.
Okay.
For any reason?
Director Akbari has an interest in a property that is in proximity to one of the project sites.
Thank you. So, staff report on 5-7, please.
Yes, and this item will be presented by Mr. Stevenson this evening.
Thank you and good evening. So this item is resolution awarding contract for the distribution programmable logic controller upgrade project for fiscal year 2017-18. The distribution programmable logic controller, or PLC, upgrade project will replace existing PLC equipment to ensure the ongoing reliability of the district's water supply, storage, and distribution systems. The project, which will be implemented over multiple fiscal years, will replace up to 52 PLCs. The first phase of the project will be implemented in fiscal year 2017-18 and will include the replacement of existing PLC panels for the Canyon Heights and Vineyard Heights booster stations and the fabrication of PLC panels for 3 facilities that control and monitor interconnections between the districts and the San Francisco Public Utility Commission's water distribution systems. Bids to construct the initial phase of the project were recently received, opened, and evaluated, and the low bid contained one minor irregularity, which may be waived. There's adequate funding in the current fiscal year budget for this expenditure, and this project was reviewed with the Engineering and Information Technology Committee on June 22, 2017. So staff's recommendation is 1, by motion, waive the minor irregularity in Blocka Construction Incorporated's bid, and 2, adopt a resolution awarding the contract for the distribution programmable logic controller upgrade project, fiscal year 2017-18, construction work to Blocka Construction Incorporated in the amount of $224,400, job 21206. I'd be happy to address any questions.
Is there any public comment on these items? If you wish to speak, you're welcome to. Then, are there questions from the board?
None from me.
May we handle this with a single motion then, the 2 items?
Yes.
All right. Do we have a motion?
I'll move item 5-7.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Directors Sethy,
Aye.
Akbari, Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye. Next, Juan Davis? Yeah.
Would you like me to introduce him?
No, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. For the next item, we're going off, well, we're on the agenda, we're going slightly out of order. Item 6.3.1 is our annual report from our Sacramento representative, Mr. Ron Davis, who will be giving the board the state legislation year-end report.
Thank you very much. Really good to see everybody again. Thank you for the opportunity to represent you in Sacramento. I think you are excellent opportunity to work together. Did I say something?
Sacramento.
Always a pleasure to come to the district. Love working with all your folks. I want to thank the board for the continued support. I'd like the committee for their great support and helping me with good advice and great counsel and how best to represent your interests in Sacramento. That's always a tricky clear evaluation. Get your better off on this effectively. have a lot to talk about, but I'll try to make this as brief as possible. The governor was very successful. Governor Brown was very successful getting some of his big issues dealt with this year. He was able to, for him, one of his highest priorities is the climate change laws. So he was able to extend California's cap and trade program for a number of years over and above what he had already accomplished. It was about to run out in June 2020. The deadline was to, that program was going to expire at that time. So he had successfully convinced the legislature to extend to him an extension to that. The other major issue that he was successful getting through this year was a gas tax increase, which I was going to address to repair existing roads and bridges. There's a lot of roads and bridges need a lot of work. The tax is rather controversial. We have one member of the California Senate who is under recall right now as a result of his vote for that measure. That recall election hasn't been set yet. It's entirely possible that it will be set for the June primary, which is what we're talking about now. And as you're aware from reading the paper, there's been quite a bit of excitement over the past few weeks. We've had two members of the Assembly resign recently for reasons that you've read in the paper. There's significant, two rather significant impacts by those two retirements, or those two resignations. First of all, the Democrats, they're both Democrats, so the Democrats in the Assembly agreed with the majority in that president. So these deadlines are soon possible to wrap these however, they are trying to push back the special election for the recall election in June as they can, hoping that that will help him in his efforts to fend off the recall. So it's going to be very interesting how these schedules. There's now three different elections. We have just this morning, so I'm checking, I literally checked my phone right before I came up here to check to see what else has occurred today. But just this morning, the Senate asked another senator to take some time off on resignations. So the Senate has currently still retained its two thirds majority to get that. We have one member who is under investigation right now. So we spent a lot of time now. You did see the governor sign almost 12 bills. He did deal about 118. Given the fact that he's got those big policy issues that he was hoping for, he seems to be very supportive of the bill that the legislature seems to be. So very high signing rate, very low veto. Some of the big issues that were approved by the legislature and signed by the governor include a water bond, a park and water bond that you probably will be looking at later on. It's going to be on the June primary ballot. It'll be 5 Senator David Huang, who is President Pro Tem of the Senate. It's primarily a park bond, but it does have water coming in it. All these the local legislator, Assemblyman Report, carried a very important measure for the Water Reuse Association this year. So he has passed AB 574 that's signed by the governor. That measure will direct the State Water Resources Control Board to accelerate their process in setting up regulations for direct water reuse. So it's a major piece of legislation. It's one of those rare occasions where an interest group successfully gets the bill through the legislature and signed by the governor, despite the fact that the agencies that are encouraging to move more rapidly objected to the bill. So it does happen. It's very rare that Mr. Clerk is able to successfully make that happen. A couple of bills that did not pass, but they are still pending. They are 2-year bills. We have a measure by Senator Monty against the 623. That measure will institute some taxes on agriculture for taxes on fertilizer and dairy products to try to address the nitrate problem with groundwater contamination. We don't have a problem with those two components of the bill. The latest component that was added in the last session establishes a public discharge or a tax on every person's water bill in the state of California unless you qualify for the latest federal poverty line. Most everybody else in the state of California would be there would be an imposition of a small but monthly water tax on your residential water bill to help clean up contaminated drinking water That bill is currently still, it was in essentially appropriations committee. The committee would typically hold a bill like that on the suspense file where it would die, but they didn't want the bill to die, so instead of leaving the bill, they did rather unusual means by moving it from the suspense file in the appropriations committee back to the rules committee. So sitting in assembly rules where we sent back out the policy and back to appropriations. So the message was, we're not going to let it pass this year, but it's still something that we're seriously thinking about for next year. So we're going to measure it. We also took an opposed position on several bills that were trying to implement the policy known as making water conservation a way of life. They're very common measures that raise several issues, not the least of which is going through state global decision-making water implementation. SB 606 and 1668 are the 2-year bills. They are 2-year bills, but they will anticipate move very early in the process in January, February. They are in the discussion second houses, so they're very far along in the process. So it's completely possible if they, we hold them up for pasture, they could be passed by the end of January. So that's something we will start. We'll hit the road running right away in January. January is a very active year of the second year of the 2-year session, which next year this month will be. So a number of bills that were held in the first call committee will be brought up again. So we'll be watching all the bills that are currently sitting in the call committee, see if any are amended and give them the opportunity to be considered. But those two conservation bills definitely are well along the path, so they can be brought up at any time during the month. Hopefully we'll be able to continue negotiating and try to resolve the issues. We were hoping that we would get that opportunity through the fall. That was not really a favor to the authors, but held 4 talking sessions where we brought in the people who opposed their bill and supported ahead of a talking session. But they made it very clear that all they were interested in doing were in terms of amending the bill, not amending any policy that's currently in the bill, but they would be willing to look at new wording that might make it more clear on what they're trying to do. So that's not particularly helpful for the problem with the bill, direction of the bill right now. So not looking real good to put this in kind of linear choices as well that we were hopeful to address as communities. So with that, we will have both those 2 issues, the public discharge bill and the making water conservation a way of life still on our plate early next year, and hopefully we'll be able to drag them out, prevent them from getting passed. But that's going to be a baby undertaking. A lot of people will take support positions on both sides, all of them. So with that, I'll wrap up my presentation. So give you a heads up on give you an idea of what we'll be facing next year.
First of all, any questions or comments from the staff? Move it to the board.
All right, I'll start. Hey, Ron. It has been a pleasure working with you for the last few years on the, see, I have to look this up, the Legal, Intergovernmental, and Community Affairs Committee. I can never remember that name. I think it's important to point out to our community that it is important for us to have you in Sacramento You gave us a heads up on potential legislation that would impact the district. You keep us posted and help us monitor the legislation that's in play that we have interest in. And you are actually one of the cheapest way for us to have a voice in Sacramento, believe it or not. This way we could actively participate. I think the example would be the public goods charge on the water bill. I think if our customers has actually follow and read the detail of that bill, they'll realize that not that many of our customers actually fall under the federal poverty levels. We will be put in a position that we will have to collect this money from our customers, not related to their water use, when they're on fixed income and they could barely afford to pay their water bill. Then we have to collect money from them to assist some other communities who are poorer than we are. There's the fairness issue, and there's the issue of when they update the water plan, when we talk about making water conservation the way of life. We want to control our own destinies. Our customers stepped up at the last drought. They conserved. We know they could do it. We know they understand the problem. Why do we need Sacramento to tell us what to do? And there's also the possibility that perhaps they will take our customers' effort for granted and ask us to conserve more. And that's just inherently unfair. So we really need someone like you in Sacramento to help us protect our customers' interests. So thank you for everything that you have done. I really enjoy talking to you every month.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I find it's useful and very valuable to have somebody up in the legislature up there to remind our own representatives that, not to mention the representatives of when they try to use their clever ways of sneaking a tax in, that somebody else could collect and take the blame. You know, if they want to do it, just put it out there and see what happens. Of course, they know what's going to happen. Sometimes I feel like we're fighting an uphill battle. Well, we are fighting an uphill battle. But, you know, we can put up a good fight and see what happens. Same with the drought. Our customers, we were out in front, and our customers came through admirably. We don't need Sacramento to tell us how to do it. They know how to do it. We know how to do it. But they like to think they know how to do it. So anyway, thanks a lot. We'll keep the fight up.
Thank you. Dr. Aziz?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, thanks again for the end of the year presentation, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you every week or every month, I should say, in the LICA committee meeting, which I too always forget what it stands for. I actually had a question. So there's 3 bills that we oppose that haven't been signed yet. Where do our local legislators stand on each of those 3 bills, and have we reached out to them to convince them one way or another?
Yeah. The SB 623 that included the public discharge, none of them were put in a position to have any vote. So we have talked to them. They know our position, but they did not, fortunately, won't put in a public discharge complaint never happened, which is one of the reasons I was on the conservation bills, they have typically voted for them on the floor, but I can tell you that when we get to the point where I can say that they were very helpful making sure that the last 4 votes didn't occur. And it didn't occur because the purpose of the bill knew that we did not have to fix it. And we met with the regular general manager in Sacramento at one time to have that conversation. So my issue at that point on the last few nights of the session was making sure I don't annoy them. We were driving people crazy. Some very good friends of mine were supporting that. So we were literally joking about how we could go to each other. They would be coming out of the office while I went going in to
try to overturn what has been said in light of this.
Ron, thank you very much for your services, and I'd like to express my opinion that the residents of the Tri-City area get tremendous value from your services up in Sacramento. Some people might question it, but I don't think the broader community really realizes the sheer number of water bills that are proposed in each legislative cycle, and trying to keep up on each of them. I did want to bring to your attention one bill. Senator Wykowski sent out his legislative update today of the bills that he is supporting. One is SB 448, the not-so-special districts bill.
Yeah.
And this has been discussed a number of times at the Alameda County Special Districts Association meetings, and our county LAFCO executive, Mona Palacios, has presented on this particular bill a couple of times. What they're trying to do is to remedy the special districts that are not performing in the state of California and giving a black eye to everybody else. If I can just read one part of this, SB 448 will resolve issues of inefficiency by requiring the creation of a comprehensive list of special districts and creating an expedited dissolution process for special districts that demonstrate through regular audits that they are not performing their promised services. There's a lot of dormant special districts apparently across the state, and they've even had a difficult time determining the exact number of special districts that are in proper status. So I bring this to your attention, hoping that you'll maybe apprise us of this as the year goes.
That bill passed. It was driven primarily because the hospital district is still collecting property tax in his district, and those are the parts of things.
It would be interesting to be able to get that comprehensive list once it's put together, and see how many dormant districts are taken off of.
There are 3 hospital districts in the state of California right now that do not have hospital. And that's the driver behind that.
I hope those citizens are reimbursed.
We use that for other good purposes, but you're right, there's a lot, so most of them are paying for ambulances, but it's still not purpose of that. So a lot of the state.
Yeah. Thank you again for your services. I always enjoy seeing you at Aqua and other events around the industry. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your service as well. I'm always left with the feeling that we're just kind of along for the ride. 1% of the state water project when it comes to the big issues such as the state water plan. And I'm open to any suggestions we have for trying to have a little more influence. Our Bill Quirk had the recycled water directed use, which was the bill you referred to, but I don't see a great deal coming from our other legislators. So in this area. So if you have any suggestions, we're stay off act, see if we can promote some local initiatives. My fear is that the water tax is on its way. And it would be interesting to see if there's some way to quantify that so we can put it into our long-term financial planning as one of the possibilities. So. Right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.
Yes.
You might want to see if any of the public have
Is there any public
comments or
member who has a
questions
question or
before-
comment related to this item? We got so,
Okay.
no questions? You're off and running. Thank you. Enjoy your trip back.
Safe drive back.
The later you wait, the less traffic.
510.
510 is the review and set of public hearing for proposed development-related charges and review of proposed miscellaneous fees.
And this item will be kicked off by Mr. Wonderlich.
All right, thank you. We actually have two somewhat related items on the agenda tonight. Item 5.10 is really the business as usual item for our annual adjustments for the next year. The next item, 5.11, has to do with a pending study, so we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So again, for item 5.10, the district annually conducts a review of various fees and charges. As part of the annual review for development-related charges, staff is proposing revisions to facilities connection charges. There are no revisions proposed for facilities reimbursement charges. Now, in order to adopt any changes to these fees as required by the Mitigation Fee Act, the board must set a public hearing to consider the changes. Staff is also proposing revisions to some of the district's miscellaneous fees. A public hearing is not required to adopt changes to our miscellaneous fees. The proposed miscellaneous fees will also be presented at the February 8th, 2018 board meeting for adoption in conjunction with the development-related charges public hearing. All of these proposed fees and charges were reviewed with the Finance Committee on November 14th. And there will be a staff presentation provided by Mr. Herman Chen, our Rates, Budget, and Financial Analysis Manager. Before Herman begins his presentation, again, just a reminder, for the conclusion of his presentation, we are recommending that the board, by motion, set February 8th, 2018 at 6 p.m. as the date and time for a public hearing for consideration of the proposed revisions to the district's development-related charges. Again, no action is required tonight relative to the miscellaneous fees. This is solely informational. Also, we have received a comment letter from the Building Industry Authority related to both items 5.10 and 5.11. In their letter, they recognized, which I believe is being passed out, they recognized the need for periodic adjustments to these fees and do not oppose the proposed 2.2 adjustment to our facilities connection charges for 2018. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Chen.
Thank you.
Good evening, President Sethy and members of the board. As John mentioned, I'll be going over our miscellaneous fees and charges. All our fees and charges were adjusted based off of last fiscal year's cost data, and it's meant to recover the cost of providing the service for which the fee or charge is imposed. What the presentation includes are all our charges, not just charges that are proposed for revision. I would like to refer you to the third column, the proposed column. If it's in black, no changes are being proposed. If it's in green, an increase is proposed, and red, a decrease is proposed. So as you can see, for other water service charges, private fire service, public fire service, and fire hydrant meters, no charges are proposed. No revisions are proposed. For FCC, as John mentioned, we are recommending a 2.2% increase to FCC. And as John also mentioned, the next staff item, we will be conducting a comprehensive review over a series of financial workshops in 2018 to evaluate that. But this is the status quo, normal rate review, 2.2% increase. FRC are not proposed. The facilities reimbursement charges are not proposed for adjustment. However, they are also part of our comprehensive review for development fees. Meter installation charges are proposed to increase 1 to 2%. Our annexation fee, our PWSE, our public water system extension engineering fees, they're actual district costs, so those don't get adjusted, or they reflect current costs. Administrative charges, there's quite a bit going on here. I want to mention first the field charge. Director Gunther had mentioned back in February, I believe, about potentially waiving the account establishment charge for customers within the district. If they're currently in the district and then they move somewhere else within the district, to waive that fee. Currently, we're not proposing any changes to that waiver process. We are going to evaluate that as part of our next water rate study, which is also in 2018. Other than that, we are proposing a small 1 to 2% increase for their after-hours connection charges. It's one of our few charges that we're proposing to decrease, about $80. Our damage angle stop is increasing about 1 to 2%, and the equivalent reconnection charges are also the same percentages. The last thing I want to mention is the return check fee, which is below. You can see it's $13, and we're proposing to increase it. The $13 represents our bank fees, what the bank charges us for a bounce check. The $28 is the bank fee plus staff time. The permits and wells, for wells, other excavation, exploratory holes, those are proposed to increase 10% across the board. So that's for wells, well, all those different wells, I guess. Other fees and charges, backflows are proposed to increase $2 from 77 to 79. Unexplained consumption meter testing charges are not proposed to be revised. This is our responding to PRAs. There's no proposed changes. You can see it's very little. $15 is what we collected last fiscal year. Hydrant flow test charges are proposed to increase. Customer side service line rate connection charges are not. Meter jumper assemblies are not. Electric vehicle charging station, that's the charging stations for electric vehicles in front of the headquarters. Those are also not. So that concludes my presentation. Staff is available to answer questions.
Thank you. Comments from the public? Any public comment or questions on this? There being none.
So Herman, I'm a little bit curious about the basis for the changes. So all these changes actually reflect the actual district cost?
Mm-hmm. So it's typically labor, the materials, and one thing I would like to mention in particular is the after hours, because after hours, we revised it to only charge for Medicare for after hours, which is something that that's what they get. So that's the basis for that decrease. Everything else is 1 or 2% based off of actual costs.
So if I could clarify a little bit on the after hours, any after hours generates a minimum amount of overtime that's paid to the staff who respond, and so it's based on that a minimum amount of overtime that's charged to the district, and in the existing rate of $260 includes the full fringe overhead rate for like health and retirement benefits, but because it's overtime hours, they actually don't incur those additional expenses except for the 1.45% Medicare tax.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering why there's a decrease. So this is the actual charge because we have to pay the other overheads anyway.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Gunther?
No, I'm happy to hear we're looking at that issue. Satisfied.
Dr. Akbari?
Herman, we of course reviewed this in the Finance Committee, and so I just want to compliment you on all the hard work that went into this analysis. First of all, it's a tremendous effort to go through an exercise like this. Let me bring up something that you may want to think about.
Okay.
We have this letter from the Building Industry Association, and on previous occasions I have taken your data or previous work from the finance group to make presentations at the Fremont Chamber of Commerce and other business groups in the area, because in particular the developers and people that work with the developers are very interested in these fees, and most importantly they're always keenly interested in how competitive we are compared to other areas around the Bay Area. And as your competitive analyses have shown, we're very competitive. We're on the low end of the scale, in particular with business and industry. And I mean, just in terms of setting up a small restaurant, a brand new restaurant in Fremont, our rates are a fraction of what they are, for example, over in Pleasanton or Livermore, nearby neighbors. And it's kind of shocking sometimes for people to really see what the differences are in rates around the Bay Area. So I would ask that when we have a chance to share competitive data with the Building Industry Association, because they're reaching out to us too, I think that they would be pleased to see that data.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have another competitive update, I would like to take that to the Governmental Affairs Committee at the Chamber of Commerce for a representation.
And just to add to that, the plan is for the next Finance Committee to go over the sort of our mini survey results that RFC had conducted.
Oh, great.
So we would have something for you, at least the next Finance Committee.
You're thinking 2 steps ahead.
First of all, I want to thank you for putting the dollar amount, the revenue amounts on behind each line. I believe that's new for this year, and appreciate it because it gives us some sense of scale of what we're talking about. I'd also like to commend the staff for reviewing the after-hours charges and truing them up, and because there were costs that we were attributing to that, which were being double billed, effectively covered by other amounts, so need not have been covered in those charges. I would take note of several of the charges. One is the charge for return checks. It's helpful to know that it was only about $2,800 that we received in the entirety for last year.
Mm-hmm.
And this will make $5,600. I was critical of an even higher fee at one time. I can see the rationalization for overcoming our own out-of-pocket cost, but I believe it's something we can eat for staff time. These are the most vulnerable people, arguably, those who've failed to make a bill or had a bounced check, and we're going to double that charge on them. That's one modest bill, very modest bill, that I don't support. Particularly the raise from $13 to $28 an event. Someone who's bounced a check is the least eligible to handle that. The other was the unexplained meter charge, consumption. Only $150 last year. And we're looking at a $25 million solution to what I feel that lost water is a partial solution for these type of issues that might be partially addressed. $2,500 a year in water consumption that we have to rebate people for. So when we look at AMI and the $25 million initial price tag, that we look at these very modest costs that might be avoided with that huge investment.
Herman, can you explain, or John, how the unexplained consumption meter testing charges actually works to make sure that the board is familiar with how this policy is applied?
Sure. Yeah, that's a customer service fee, so I think I should take that one. Essentially what happens from time to time is customers get an unexpectedly large bill, or perhaps they were out of town and were expecting a lower bill than normal, but it's still the same size. And so they call up and they tell us that they disagree with how much they were billed. And our first step in responding to that is almost always to send a meter reader out to the location to double check the meter read to make sure we didn't, incorrectly enter a number when we were doing the meter reads. If it turns out we entered the read correctly, then if the customer believes that it's wrong and they believe the meter malfunctioned, then what we can offer to them is, if you would like, we will come and we will put a new meter in at your home, and we will take the old meter to the headquarters building and use equipment operated by the operations department and test the meter to see if it was functioning correctly. The customer is actually invited to come and participate in that test so they can see how we do it. And then if it turns out the meter was functioning correctly, they get billed this charge. If the meter was not functioning correctly, the charge is waived. And so it's really, this charge is more of a deterrent from having customers ask us to test their meter anytime they don't like how much they were billed for. Frequently what happens is somebody may leave their sprinkler system on while they leave on vacation. They forgot they left their sprinklers on, those kinds of things. And so this charge is really more about a deterrent than attempting to generate revenue.
And in my experience, we have never, and I'm not aware of any other utility, ever having an instance where a revenue meter has overread. At times they underread, especially as they age. So being deferential to the point that President Weed made regarding the amount of revenue here, I just wanted to make sure that the board is aware that it's not a reflection of how many potential inquiries we receive about customers feeling that there was an incorrect reading. It's more of a, if the customer is adamant that there is something wrong with the meter, it gives us a mechanism to address that in a way in which the risk is shared between the customer and the district.
And at $150, that would be how many instances?
Looks like about either 3
Two.
or
Two.
2.
150 and 100.
So out of 83,000 meters, we have 2. So it's not
Last fiscal year, yes.
My point being, it really is not a driver from that standpoint, if we're looking at a concern, a principal concern. Or it's a muted concern.
Well, I guess it depends on your point of view, or you could look at it as in this fee is a really good deterrent.
I think that's likely because we certainly get a much, much, much higher number of customer inquiries where customers feel that there's been some sort of error. And typically when we go out, we discover a leak or there's more information about what transpired over the 60-day billing period. And then frequently there just is no information, and that's what makes it challenging.
It will be remarkable to see when we look at the, going to more and more in the AMI and the technology of meters. My understanding that the ACWD criteria is for meters to read from 98% to 104% is considered to be within the bound because they know they don't read the bottom flow of anywhere from 4 to 8% on most mechanical meters. So that it's we have an inherent adjustment in our standards. So it's we'll see how that plays out. So those are the keys. It's and we'll move on. Those are my questions.
So,
Yes, there is still the recommended action for this item. Yes.
To set the, do we have a motion to set the hearing date?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. And we have the ability at the hearing date to make whatever adjustments we may wish, correct?
yes.
Thanks.
Lower.
Yes. Well,
Adjust down, right?
so the miscellaneous fees are not subject to Proposition 218 or the Mitigation Fee Act or any other thing, so you can adjust the miscellaneous fees
Up or down.
however you want at the...
Okay.
The fees that are subject to the Mitigation Fee Act, I'm not sure. I'm not too sure if you can go up. I know Proposition 218 you can't go higher, but I'll look into that. I'm not too sure off the top of my head.
Well, certainly lower is safe.
Certainly lower is safe.
Okay.
So the date would be February 8th at 6 p.m. Here at the district's headquarters.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to that effect?
I think
You
we
have a
have the
motion
motion
and
and second.
Roll call, please.
Sure. Director Sethy?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Gunther?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
And Weed.
Aye. Okay, now move to item 5.11, which is the review of approach of upcoming development fee study and review of customer classifications for the next water rate study.
And as expressed by Mr. Wunderlich's teaser previously, 511 will similarly be kicked off by him.
Sure. So we just talked about fees and charges for 2018 that follow our traditional methodologies. Earlier this year, following a competitive recruitment, we hired Raftalis to conduct a series of financial studies. And this evening to present is Ms. Van Etten with Raftalis, but before she begins, a few introductory remarks. We are asking them to do a comprehensive review of our development fees. And so that includes looking at our current methodology as well as other methodologies. And so tonight what we would like to do is, first, we're not asking for any action. You can see the recommendation is just to provide direction to staff and the consultant regarding the approach we take in the development fee study. We will be coming back in 2018 for a series of workshops, the first of which is scheduled for February 22nd of 2018. And so what we're going to do tonight is just provide a little overview of different development fee methodologies, share the results of a survey of the methodologies in place at some other agencies in the Bay Area. And then the other thing that we would like to do is briefly talk about a definition for single-family residential customers. There has been some interest expressed in evaluating the option of tiered rates for single-family residential customers. And so as an initial step before we start crunching numbers in that, we have a proposed definition for who those tiered rates would potentially apply to if that's the direction the board ultimately wishes to go, because we do need some lead time to do some cleanup of the customer database. With that, and also we did, in the BIA letter that was shared with the board, they did express interest in working with the district and being kept informed on how we proceed with this development fee study, so we will fully intend to do that. And so with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Van Etten to begin her presentation.
Good evening, board members of Alameda County Water District. First of all, thank you. We are delighted to be working again with the district. My name is Sally Van Etten, and I am with Raftalis Financial Consultants. You're used to seeing my boss, Sanjay Gar, perhaps, more frequently. I actually am the head of the Oakland office, and prior to entering the world of water and sewer rates, I spent over 20 years working on development impact fees. So this first portion of our new contract with the district, which is diving into a thorough re-examination of the district's capacity fees, falls into my bailiwick, and I have the pleasure of presenting this first sort of whet your appetite presentation tonight, keeping in mind that we will be doing a much more thorough review, and that will be indeed occurring in February 22nd in a board workshop. Of course, we've been working already behind the scenes, doing some background research of what you have, and also working with staff. So briefly, I'm going to provide an overview of capacity fees in general. We're going to look very quickly, and you'll of course have it in your packet, at the current development-related fees that the district imposes. We are indeed going to do a brief overview of the various capacity fee methodologies. There are a number of them. Because that we do operate in a world where everyone wants to know what everyone else nearby is doing, we did do a brief survey. As Mr. Wunderlich mentioned, we are not looking at the numbers yet, which is the point that you really get people's attention, but we are looking at the methodologies in terms of surrounding districts. And then Herman will come up, and after I've finished, he'll talk a bit about the last two items with regard to the single-family residential definition that pertains to other portions of our work. So again, just a reminder, what are capacity fees? Capacity fees, they are one-time charges against new development. This is not an ongoing tax. It is a one-time fee. And the idea is it's a one-time fee charged to new development to cover the costs of the impacts of that new development on the facilities portion of what your district provides. Now, something that drove me a little crazy when I first moved over to this field is that within the world of sewer and water, there's a lot of different names for this type of fee. capacity charges, system development charges, indeed impact fees, connection fees, which I think of as the dirt and shovel cost to connect to a water district. Sometimes districts will use that term for what's really their system development or capacity charges. There are a variety of different methodologies. We will briefly look at two types of buy-in, the incremental and the hybrid, in the next several slides. Just a hint, I want you to focus in on the denominators. Keep that in mind. Again, the Mitigation Fee Act, Assembly Bill AB 1600, was codified in the California Government Code in Section 66,000 and sequential, 66,000 to 6,000, 25. Interesting kind of sidebar point is that the specific sections of that code pertinent to water connection and capacity charges is actually only 4 sections. And I'm kind of an impact fee nerd, so it's interesting to me, maybe less to you, but the point is that actually that water and sewer connection charges predate AB 1600. And when AB 1600 was passed in 1987, became effective in 1989, it's sort of they surrounded the rest of those code sections. So it does depend on, and I'm staring at Pat over there, legal opinion, and I have worked with a variety of different attorneys who have different opinions on this, but we work with, Raftelis works with one in particular who wants to reach over and slap my hand every time I refer to a capacity charge as an impact fee, because there are some determinations and some cases out there that highlight the fact that not all sections of the Mitigation Fee Act necessarily apply to capacity charges for sewer and water. Again, I will of course defer to your legal counsel's opinion on that. But just so you're aware that there is sort of to me, a fascinating history behind it. But regardless of which sections of the 66,000 a sequential you choose, there is a unifying sense that you cannot exceed the proportional shares of costs associated with providing that service. So again, this is a fee, it's not a tax. It's a one-time charge to recover those costs. So what does ACWD have? Well, you have kind of a variety of charges in from my outsider opinion. You have the facility connection charges, which are deposited into the facilities improvement funds. One of the code sections that is pertinent to sewer and water is you have to have separate funds and separate fund accounting. You guys also have the facilities reimbursement charge, which is a charge that's deposited into a separate fund, the installer's reimbursement fund. So a lot of agencies and cities merge this together. You guys do separate it out, and you have separate accounting. And so it's been working fine so far for you, or it's working well. But as part of this comprehensive review, we're going to look at that as well. And just a heads up on that, and interested in your feedback as we proceed with this. Again, this is just a snapshot of what you have in place right now, and it illustrates the point I just made, which you have the facilities capacity charge column, and then you have a separate amount that goes into that separate fund for reimbursement. That's, why would you have that? If you have a developer who comes in and fronts a certain portion of the infrastructure, then you have the separate fund and a separate way of calculating to pay that developer back in a specified way. And you'll note also that this is for the residential, and you'll note that your district charges the residential units by a unit. So keep that in mind when you look at the non-residential, which is in some ways a more traditional approach, which is done by meter size. So again, the point of the presentation tonight is just to kind of start bringing these things to your attention. We'll dive deeper on February 22nd, but these are some of the things we're already looking at and talking about with staff, and we want you to be aware and get your input as well. All right, rolling up our sleeves. Now we're going to talk a little bit in depth about the different methodologies. Remember my admonition to sort of focus on the denominator. The equity buy-in approach is an approach that basically recognizes that existing customers have been all along providing the money to pay for infrastructure at a certain level. And so if you were to take this approach, you would look at your current asset value. There's a number of ways to calculate that. I would recommend you always use a depreciated value amount. Some districts include their reserve amounts into that calculation. I again have a preference towards only including capital reserves, but that's a policy decision. You take out any outstanding debt because you don't really own that yet. It's like the part of your house that you haven't paid the mortgage off on. And then you divide that by your current demand, typically done by EDU. The point of that is you were trying to calculate an estimate of what a new household coming in, or EDU, would contribute to bring them up to the level that everyone else has already, in essence, contributed. That everyone starts on the same sort of playing field. And sometimes you can do, current demand can be replaced by total capacity, but that's just a side note. So this is a separate equity buy-in method. All right, when you build a big new treatment plant, typically if a agency is building something large like that, you're kind of a lumpy industry. You don't just build it for exactly the number of people you have right now to serve that population, service population. You often oversize. And when you oversize, by definition, that means more people could come in. So the capacity buy-in method is an approach that looks at large infrastructure facilities and says, okay, what was the capacity that was envisioned at the time we built this treatment plant, for example? And so in that case, again, focusing on the denominator, you look at your asset value and you divide by the capacity, what was envisioned at the time when you built, say, the treatment plant. A slightly different approach is called the incremental cost method. And that is looking at the cost of additional improvements included in the CIP that are specified just for new development. So it's somewhat related to capacity, but again, let's look at the denominator. You might have distribution lines for a certain portion of your district. So you would look at the cost of those lines divided by purely the number of new EDUs. So it's got to be a separate calculation because it's not the treatment plant that already envisioned cost divided by a larger number of EDUs. I'm zipping through this. Again, in February we'll go into excruciating detail as needed, but this is just a preview. But this is an incremental cost. And then a hybrid method is basically a combination. You can do an equity buy-in plus incremental hybrid. That's a little odder, but it is done. You'll see in a minute in the survey results. But you can also do, as I mentioned, sort of this situation, and sorry to keep using the same illustration, but if you have something like a larger treatment plant with a lot of capacity, you might have a calculation with one denominator plus that incremental cost, which is going to new development only. So just take a breath there, and those are the different methodologies. And we will be, reviewing the pros and cons of each of them with your staff. This is just a little chart kind of to help put some words around it. The same idea as the equity buy-in, looks at all the assets, brings everyone up to the same kind of level playing field. Capacity, you're buying into existing capacity that was already planned for. Incremental, it's tying directly to new capacity or infrastructure solely needed for new development. And then the hybrid is when you have a combination of approaches. So drilling down yet farther, like the so what? Like, how would you make these kind of decisions? What would be some of the background thinking to go one way or another? Well, let's say you're really kind of a built-out agency or district or city, and you're not really going to buy anything more, and maybe the last time you built a plant was 30 years ago. Well, then you might seriously consider equity buy-in. Similarly, if maybe that's not quite at that build-out stage, but you already have capacity built in, you oversized on purpose, might look at a capacity buy-in, or you have no current capacity available, but you do have some new facilities that you know new growth is coming, or I have that planned. That kind of situation screams out a bit for incremental. And again, a very common approach is you have a little of both. And so you'll see a lot in our survey, a lot of agencies around you use a hybrid approach. Just again, what are some of the considerations? Are you getting a lot of new growth, or are you already close to build out? Do you have remaining capacity in your infrastructure or not? Do you have available information on planned facilities? You might be in a situation, I don't believe it's yours, but theoretically you could have a situation where you do need planned facilities, but right at the moment you don't have the master plans, you don't have the information. You might default for a while to an equity buy-in until such things were developed. And this is again sort of a repeat, but hopefully when you go back and review your board presentations, if you do, you'll remember, all right, well, what are we talking about? Do we have the capacity to accommodate growth now? Approximately how much? Do we need to build new infrastructure? Can growth be served by new infrastructure alone? What is the district build-out's demand? What is current demand? And that last one also ties into some of the things that your lobbyist was speaking about tonight and things I've heard around the table here, which is, what is the new normal in terms of demand? Maybe you didn't think you had a lot of capacity in a certain facility, and maybe you have more than you thought because your customers have gotten to a habit of using less water. These are not questions I have the answers for tonight. These are purposely put in question form to get your mind thinking about some of these issues, because we are going to be coming to you and asking for your feedback. We did, at the request of staff, do a brief survey on the methodologies only. City of Santa Cruz actually has an equity buy-in, and they're one of those cities that has not a lot of growth planned. They're largely built out now. They do have some pretty major constraints right now, but they chose to put the equity buy-in approach in as a way to sort of collect that amount, bring everyone up to the same level playing field, but there are not necessarily new facilities planned. East Bay Mud it has a hybrid approach, and they actually have 3 sets of capacity charges: one system-wide buy-in, a regional facility-specific buy-in, and then a capacity charge specific to future water supply costs. They're not the only client that we have that has that situation going on. Livermore also has a hybrid, and then they have a capacity buy-in combined with the cost of acquiring future water supplies. Dublin also has a hybrid, also has a multi-components. You can see it there, capacity buy-in, expansion, and then a debt service component. Contra Costa County Water has some current facilities with capacity, and some they're going to require new, so an incremental capacity hybrid. And the City of Brentwood basically has a capacity buy-in. They have pre-planned and oversized, and they have a substantial amount of capacity remaining, so that they have a single capacity buy-in approach. And this is more of a list, again, more purposely formed as questions to stimulate thought among the board. Should your charges be assessed based on capacity, on meter, by the type of customer? Recall that you have a difference with the way you charge residential versus non-residential, so that's why that question is there. So the second question is quite related. Should the charges be assessed solely on the meter size, or should there be a consideration for the number of units served? We're also going to look at the developer reimbursement process, and we've also been asked to consider multi-year charges. And I want to say that something that I've done in preparation for this is to look back at your previous studies and your previous methods. And I just want to make a comment that there's an evolution. Way back when, in the 90s, I believe it was, when HF&H did a report and they were still looking at sort of these oddly shaped lots, and so you're looking at a kind of frontage fee arrangement. Made perfect sense for your district at the time because you had a lot of semi-agricultural almost lots, and that was a perfectly appropriate way to do it. Later, Bartle Wells came in. They looked at some of that. That was kind of outdated. You're becoming more suburbanized. You know, it doesn't mean that any one of those were necessarily wrong, but there's an evolution. As your district matures, as your land uses change, as your water needs change, you know, it's appropriate time every 15 years or so to look thoroughly at your methodologies and ask yourself these kind of questions. Is it time to streamline, simplify, or change? And why? But you should have good reasons for doing it, not just to do it. So with that, I'm actually into the single-family residential definition. So let me pause here, because I did zip through that quickly. I hope I got your attention and that you'll be interested on February 22nd when we come back in a workshop format. Any questions at this point from any of the board members?
Start at this end.
None from me?
I'm good.
None. It's very interesting, but I'm going to...
Yeah, and it will get more interesting when the numbers are attached.
Right.
Yeah.
My greater concerns in the past have been on our water rate structure based on service and commodity charge, and how that is out of whack with what the reality is. But in the service fee, two elements come to mind. The first is we have a significant overcapacity in our district now. We have 90 MGD, and if we were to further develop our groundwater basin, we could probably go up above that. Demand during the drought dropped to as low as the mid-20s, and right now it's running about 50 MGD. So we have about a 200% capacity. We have 15 years of drought storage and semi-tropic, plus other sources that we can tie into. So we don't have that capacity element to worry about. Our design for our water infrastructure is fire flows, is generally our critical element, not the service to the individuals on a regular basis. And I think there's some mechanism by which we can augment that. And then the future development would be our groundwater basin, which might well be the lowest cost water supply, potentially even allowing us to stop the surface treatment of surface water, reducing our overall cost in the future. So within that element, and trying to approach it from a standpoint of historically seeing districts that are trying to find out how they're going to achieve that next higher dollar element, I would suggest that maybe ours is just the reverse. In the future, our unit cost may actually drop as we, if we have the courage to drop some of our higher cost production elements. We have a cap, minimum purchase requirements on Hetch Hetchy, so that's locked in. And we've not exceeded it, don't have an intent to exceed it. So that's a fixed number. So as you develop your rate structure, it'll be interesting. I think you'll find, in my mind, that we're on the opposite side of the spectrum of many of the districts that we showed for comparative uses here.
I hear you about the rates, and I'm going to gently remind you that this is actually on the fee portion of the study.
Exactly. This is
But
the
it
capacity.
does relate because of the capacity that you mentioned, and that speaks to some of the questions that I put up for your board comment, which is if you have sufficient capacity and everyone is in agreement on that, that speaks to a particular type of methodology that might be different than if you had no capacity. And so something that we will also be diving into is how much new development is projected remaining within your district. At this moment in time, I don't know the answer to that question, but we will be looking at that.
And those numbers have changed dramatically as the city has opened up the doors for high-density residential that we did not have before. So there is a difference in the profile as the industry fades away and leaves the state of California. We are changing our customer profile.
Yeah. And again, hearkening back to my comment about the different types of facility charges that you've had throughout the many years, it doesn't mean that they were wrong, the ones that were done initially. It reflected a different point in time and a different set of conditions for your district.
And I would summarize by saying that I've always been impressed by the way the district has approached its facility and capacity charges. There's an earnest effort to make them fair and equitable, and so I'm supportive of that element.
Great.
Thank you.
No, I'm
Thank you.
was just going to say we're only partway through the presentation.
Now we go into...
Well, there's only 2 slides left. So with that, Herman, would you like to come up and polish it off? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I only have 2 slides, so it should be pretty quick. So as John mentioned, we have a proposed SFR definition, and this is sort of a precursor. Sorry, I'm covering from a cold here. So the definition is a customer who receives water service through a connection that serves a single detached dwelling unit and uses water for predominantly residential purposes shall be considered a single-family residential customer. RFC had done a survey. The survey agencies we used were East Bay Mud, SFPUC, and DSRSD. We asked them 4 questions, and we wanted to see how their responses correlated with our proposed definition. So the first question was, should tiered SFR rates apply only to detached houses, which would exclude townhomes and condos? If you can see in the survey results, East Bay Mud and SFPUC said no. DSRSD said yes. Our proposed definition is also a yes. The second question was, would it be equitable to include houses that have their front yard irrigation through an HOA as SFR customers? This is across the board yes, and we were also a yes. The third was, would it be equitable to exclude detached houses that are master metered from SFR customer class? All across the board was master metered should be considered MFR, multifamily. And the last question was, should houses with second dwelling units be included in the SFR customer class? East Bay Mud said yes beginning in 2018. DSRSD also said yes, but our proposed definition in SFPUC were if it's MFR, if it's master metered, SFR, if both are metered. And that's the end of the survey. Staff is available for questions.
Thank you. Do we have questions? First of all, is there anyone in the audience that wants to make a point or question on any of these items? Let me know. Dr. Huang?
So basically our answer is if you have a single meter and you're not a business, you go into tier rate.
And you're also detached.
And you're also detached, yes. I can see that. So basically we have houses with in-law units. Some are separate meters and some are master meters. So we'll just treat them differently even though they might be next door to each other.
And I want to also emphasize that this is sort of phase 1. We don't know if the board would decide to go tiered rates, but for townhomes and condos, that could be a phase 2 if we want to pursue applying tiered rates. But for this initial tiered rates for single family, this is what we're trying to limit how much how much changes we're going to be doing.
Actually, I can see it, and I agree with how we decide to define it. Thank you.
Gunther?
A little confused on the concept of the in-law unit or the second dwelling unit. If both are metered, so we're saying that if it has an in-law unit, it would be considered a multifamily residential?
So if you look at our definition, we purposely did not include single meter per parcel. There are parcels that have 2 meters, one for the main house and one for a second dwelling unit.
Yeah.
In those situations, we would consider that single family. But if it's 1 meter for both, we would consider that multifamily.
And if I might clarify, that's for an instance where it's 2 separate dwelling units. They're not like, it's not like an in-law suite that's attached to the primary residence,
Detached.
but 2 completely separate detached units.
So if you had a unit, though, let's say located in the front, that's detached, that would be considered multifamily?
Right, so if there were 2 separate detached units served through a single meter, then yes, it would be considered a multifamily.
And I think the rationale there is applying tiered rates to such a situation might result in neighbors getting pretty angry at each other if one is considered a higher water user. That is part of the rationale, correct, Herman?
Yes.
Well, and again, we're not this far along in any study, but traditionally, utilities that have tiered rates provide the first tier at what's considered an inefficient, not an inefficient, but an efficient level of indoor water use. And so if you have 2 separate residences through 1 meter, then they're going to get into a second tier while still having efficient indoor use.
I'll have to review that when we see it further. I'm not sure I'm on board.
Well, that's the rationale.
And maybe I should also clarify, we're not asking for any action on this definition tonight, but because of the work that would be involved in cleaning up our customer database, if there were to be a change late in the process, that would make things challenging for staff to go through the database, do whatever cleanup was necessary, and still try to get rates done with the timeline we're looking at.
Let's see here. I just have some feedback for Raftelis primarily, to maybe take some things into consideration here. I'm not an expert at this field, but I find it very fascinating. So if we are looking at future growth scenarios in the Tri-City area, and we're looking decades out, we're probably going to see a lot more high-rises in the area. So that just to accommodate population growth. So that's something to take a look at. I also ask myself, I agree with Director Weed, we have overcapacity in our system, you know, at about 200%. But, so we have a lot of room to accommodate future growth right now. I can see the rationale for, like, the city of Brentwood, where they have the capacity buy-in, because there's a lot of room to grow, a lot of land to be developed, and it seems to be more fair that there's more equity in that kind of
And also that they have the capacity already built in, I think, is the key point there.
Right.
They've just, as Board Member Weed was suggesting, for certain types of facilities, you have a lot. You're not going to purchase more. You already have it.
Right. I think that the issue that ACWD is dealing with near term and longer term over the next decade is, and you can see it by the kind of subjects we're weighing right now, we're looking at trying to purchase greater reliability for our Tri-City residents. So we could do that through, let's say, a new recycling facility, you know? And so is that a shared cost among everybody in the community if we did something like that? if we buy into expansion of Los Vaqueros Reservoir.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, is a shared equity thing.
Well, it would be providing reliability for everybody, or it would just be reliability that you need because of new development coming in? That's the question I would turn around and ask
Right.
the district.
Same thing with consideration of buying into California Water Fix or
Mhm.
whatever other options are out there. So I think we're dealing more with reliability and diversifying our portfolio if we have
Okay.
a chance.
Mhm. Well, definitely we work with other clients that are including water reliability costs into their capacity charges, and usually it is seen as a benefit to everyone, and so only that percentage portion that's envisioned to be the portion of new development coming in by a certain outdate, there's a proportional cost allocated. So, you know, existing development is going to have to pay for their portion, and new development pays for whatever portion of the build-out they represent. So maybe it's 30%.
Mhm.
So there is a way to allocate. Again, you can do an equity buy-in, and then that money is a little more flexible in how it can be used. But if you wanted to sort of zero in on something specific like that and just look at the costs attributed only to new development and use the incremental approach, you would look at the proportional costs
Mhm.
when you did that calculation.
I could see a scenario where some big corporation, we don't know who it is right now, says we want to use recycled water,
Mhm.
and it's for a dedicated purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a charge carried by primarily that customer,
Mm-hmm.
unless there's some other residual benefits to the community.
In that particular case, you might want to examine that as a single case situation where that customer provides their own facilities for them, and then there's a credit against any other capacity charge that they would be levied against them. That's one possible way you could deal with something very specific like that. There's different ways. Different clients have different opinions about this. You know, some say, okay, that's fine. You pay the basic FCC, and then you go ahead and pay for that and use your recycled water.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends on sort of the philosophy of the governing board vis-a-vis the new development. So there's always a variety of ways to look at it, but we're happy to explore any of them with you, within reason. Within legal reason.
Thanks for giving us the teaser.
Sure, no problem. And again, that comment, we are not attorneys, and we do defer to Pat and other legal counsel. So, any other?
Well, I do not see myself being supportive of a study that looks at tiered rates for residential customers at this time, for a variety of reasons.
Sure.
But, pardon me, keep you up here.
That's not
It's an incredibly...
what we're approving here
Well,
tonight.
we're looking at a fee study review for the purpose of developing single-family residence tiered rates. Are we not?
It's just an evaluation. The board has not taken any action to implement.
Yeah, we're setting the direction to be able to make that definition so that you can, is the first step toward a tiered rate effort. The concept of recycled water makes no financial sense from a standard water supply and engineering. If someone has a faith-based desire to have recycled water in their business because it makes them feel better, but they're going to pay a premium for it, and it's a constant demand. Where we do have issues of reliability is on peak times, and when you have a constant source of water, such as recycling, it's out of sync with what the real requirement is. It doesn't match, and it's a higher cost. I am intrigued by the concept of looking at larger single-family residences where there's landscaping, but my suggestion there is that we look at a 2-meter system, a meter for the landscaping and a meter for the domestic use. That is really what we're trying to do, is to cut down on the landscape watering, and we can measure them independently. Meters are getting relatively inexpensive, and that would be something we might be of benefit to us.
Can I interrupt and ask what's the nexus between that and the customer classification?
Well,
The agenda item is on development fee and classification.
We're excluding multifamily. And the key difference between multifamily and single-family detached, single-family detached has landscaping watering, outdoor watering. The multifamily do not. So that is the primary distinction that would drive you to only look at detached single-family residence. Is you're going after that conservation element in the summer, which is your landscaping water use. If we metered it separately, we don't have to do it through a REIT structure. We'd have a direct cost that we could look at and maybe then put a separate fee on it if we feel there's a conservation element to it.
So is the suggestion is to redefine the single-family residential rate as defined, single-family residential as defined by staff? I guess I'm still looping back to the item today is to define single-family residential.
There are elements to that which have potential, and it would be useful to have that information in our database when we go to make the do our analysis and take a look at where the water consumption is and how it's related. I'm not certain that we're capable of doing that currently when we look at our list of meters to get a feel for what meter to break out and parse out how much might be going of the water use is going for domestic use and how much is going for our fluctuating landscape. Another problem I have with looking at tiered rates in particular is that we're basing it on an incredibly warped...
We are not talking about tier rates, please.
We are. We're setting this up for the purpose of tiered rates, and that's why
I think that would be a perfectly
on the single family.
Good discussion when we talk about this in February. I would ask for President to focus on the agenda item as advertised.
But it comes down to looking at what a single-family residence is and the disparity between those and the water consumption on a multifamily, which is versus industrial. Right now we have a rate structure which the larger customers are subsidizing the smaller users. Violates 26 and 218.
I'm not 100% certain we're talking about this subject.
But it is based on trying to, anytime you're trying to approach this, you need to understand
I am sorry. I am going to ask for council clarification. Are we within the scope
of
the item as
back
advertised?
Into tiered rates, understand that you're going to quickly bump into this type of a lack of balance and a lack of sound structure that you're going to try and work with. Without addressing that structure, it's somewhat I think a futile effort to go down this path, because you still are going to run it. You really do also need to look at our rate structure. And to give you an idea how significant that is, we lost $60 million in revenues at the last drought. But for an increase in Director Gunther's effort to increase the service charge, it would have been $80 million. We could only offset that with about $10 million by not buying water, power, and chemicals. So we have an extraordinary lack of balance in our structures, and when you go in to try and go into these efforts, side efforts, without addressing that fundamental warping of our, and I think a rate structure which does not meet constitutional criteria of
I don't
218.
particularly think we're talking about tiered straight structure here.
We're getting off on a
So
tangent.
it becomes, my point being, it becomes somewhat more of a futile effort.
So if I can jump in, we are talking about the definition of single-family residential for purposes of tiered rates, so I think it's okay to talk about that concept and the tiered rates. But I do want to, just for the record, clarify that I disagree with some of the statements that your president has made about the constitutionality of your existing rate structure. I think from a legal perspective, you may disagree with the philosophical approach to it, which is that's your job as a director. But from a purely legal perspective, it is my view that your current rate structure is constitutional. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
The disparity between fixed and service charges has not been litigated. So we'll see what it is. It'll be, I think we'll be alongside of the issue.
May I make one point real quick? Okay.
The meeting?
So, and I'm trying to make this statement so I'm on the record with the public here. I have voted against tiered rates every instance that it's come before the board. And I have my reasons for that, which I can go into at the workshop. But nevertheless, I have been in favor of conducting these studies because I believe that there's a fair portion of our community, and we saw it through the recent survey results, that there are people that are interested in tiered rates. And so I believe that it is an expenditure that the district must make on behalf of our community to fairly study what the issues are. And I am always willing to have open ears to learn, and I see the value of us doing the study so that we're all better educated, so that we can, at the end of the day, make the smartest decision on behalf of our community. And while I have voted against tiered rates in the past, I always keep an open mind. And that's what I consider the value of this study and why we're spending money on behalf of the public to conduct it.
So if I may, this item is to give you a sort of teaser on the upcoming evaluation of development fees. And just for the board's consideration, when you talk about the connection fees themselves, there's kind of two components. There's the capacity charge, and then so that's arguably instantaneous peak demand. But related to that, but different, is water supply, which is over a longer period of time. So staff will endeavor to incorporate both issues into the design of our development fee study. I just wanted to make that clear because we've been kind of talking around both issues, and I just wanted to confirm that.
Side here. I just wanted to point out that in the survey results, you know, we kind of ran through it, but you'll see a number of the agencies had these separate components, and some of those were on longer-term water supply, and I think that's why.
Right.
You can divide it that way.
Right. So I just wanted to make sure that the board understands that they're two different issues. They're related in many cases, but we will be looking at both to help design the development fee structure for the near-term and long-term future. And then the second part of the discussion today related to customer classifications is important for both the development fee study as well as future work that we'll be doing for the rate structure and rate study. So people think of different things when they think of single-family residences, and we're just trying to kind of come up with a standardized definition so that we're all understanding what we're talking about in the context of these two issues. So I just wanted to point that out for the board.
Well, just one other quick concept. It's not single-family residential, but rather multifamily, and also apartment units. We're now getting more and more into submetering. But to the extent that we can charge a service charge against the owner of an owner-occupied, owner of a multifamily apartment unit, and charge the commodity charge to the residents, I think that would be a positive way to try and split the bill and be far more equitable in the response. And it's not into this study, but hopefully we can evolve into that as we go along.
So staff and our consultant are here for any other thoughts that the board might care to express. Otherwise, we go away.
Okay.
We do our homework, and we come back in February with much more detailed and, I'm sure, thought-provoking and we're looking forward to hear your opinions on what we come up with.
And barring any other questions, wish you all a very happy new year, and I'll see you in February.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do
you think that we could take a 5-minute break?
If you wish, yes. Let's take a 5-minute break and we'll reassemble at 10 minutes to 8 o'clock.
We are ready now.
Reports. Item 6 is under board committee reports. Is there anyone who has a comment or question on item 6.1.1 through 6.1.5?
No comment?
Being none, we can move. Is there anything from staff on those items?
No.
Item 6.2 is operational reports. A number of graphs. And is there any issue relating to any of these items that anyone member of the board wishes to address?
I would like to highlight in the hardness report. I'm still rather shocked and trying to see if my going colorblind. However, it looks like the reader in Union City is reading 113. I believe it's item unit. It's reader 113.
K27.
I don't think I've ever seen a light green in Union City before.
Water is soft
Was there a
and getting
mistake?
softer.
Is there an error in the program here?
No, this information's been verified. It is correct.
Thank you.
Is there a lot more Hetchetchee water being blended in?
This time of year, we are utilizing Hetchetchee. Actually, for much of November, we utilized our PT well field because our Maui well field was isolated for the repair of the 36-inch transmission main that I'm going to talk about under General Manager's reports. So our PT well field is a little bit softer than our Maui well field. So yes, for the month of November, water out of the blending facility was softer.
Fascinating.
Should we close down the blending facility?
No, the PT well field isn't that soft.
All right, fine. Is there any other comment? There being none, we can then move on to staff presentations, which are the state legislation end-of-year report. Oh, we had Ron Davis. He's already made his report, so
That's
he's
correct.
behind us. And then we can move on to General Manager's report, which is a repair of a 36-inch main between the Maui well field and the Peralta-Tyson blending facility.
For this item, I'll be recusing myself again because of a property interest in the area.
Okay. And while
May I ask a point of order?
I don't
Real
think
quick.
you need to.
Sure.
Is it necessary, because
Just a
this is just a
report.
report, we're not taking a vote on anything?
The conflicts apply to discussions on items, so it is appropriate for Director Akbari to recuse himself and leave the room under the Political Reform Act, leave the room as a requirement. And we talked about this before the meeting, so I do think it's appropriate.
In this
to
case,
leave the room.
the property needs to be within, what, 500 feet of the location, and if it's, and this is discretionary on Director Akbari's point, because it's more than 500 feet,
Correct.
abundance of caution.
Correct.
Thank you. And while Director Akbari is recusing himself, this is a follow-up report on previous authorization that the board provided the general manager to expedite repairs of a 36-inch water main between the Maui well field and Peralta-Tyson blending facility. And our operations and maintenance manager, Steve Peterson, has a fascinating photo documentary that he would like to share with you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Director Akbari cannot see the presentation.
Well, I want to thank Director Gunther for the nice segue for allowing me to talk about some of the ramifications of having one well field isolated from another. But at last month's board meeting, the board authorized the general manager to enter into a contract with DeFreitas Pipeline to repair the 36-inch groundwater transmission main between the Maury Wellfield and the Peralta-Tyson blending facility in an amount not to exceed $125,000. The field work began on Wednesday, November 15th, and the transmission main was repaired and placed back into service on Wednesday, December 6th. The total final cost was $86,172.65. So now I have some slides to show you. So, looks like there's some shadows in the way here, but what I'm showing here is I'm standing on the Hayward Fault. You can see the sidewalk that's broken across the street. The curb is broken, and you see a Caterpillar excavator, and that's the location of the pipeline repair. So the Hayward Fault, from the bottom of the page or bottom of the picture, moves from right to left, and our transmission main from the bottom of the page moves from left to right. So about where the curb is on the opposite side of the street is approximately the intersection of the Hayward Fault and our 36-inch transmission main between the two well fields. So the first step, of course, was to excavate a trench to expose the damaged pipeline that was leaking. You see a bend here. This is actually an engineered miter joint. It's a 7-degree joint. So the damage was at the joint, but it wasn't a result of the joint. There was compression that was taking place. When you have a pipe that parallels a fault within the fault, two things can happen. One, compression, so you get an accordion effect, or a mushrooming of the pipe, or an elongation can take place. In this case, it was compression. Here you can see the accordion effect, the mushrooming of the pipeline. This is a 36-inch pipeline, and you see there in the center of the photograph, that's where the leak was occurring. So what we did was the contractor cut out a section of pipe, about a 5-foot section, and here what you see is that damaged or leaking section removed, and they're squaring up the ends of the existing remaining pipe line to accommodate a new section of pipe that was delivered and installed later in the same day. So this is the installed section of the new pipe. This is the same pipe that we tape wrap on the outside. And then this was on Tuesday, November 5th. And so on this date, we filled the pipe up. Well, let me back up. All the new pipe sections we disinfect with chlorine. We swab them in a chlorine solution. And then once it's installed and sealed up, or buttoned up, then we flush. And how we did that is we isolated one end of the pipeline and flushed from the Maury well field, and then we did the same thing in the opposite direction from the PT well field. And this is what it looked like. This is a high point in the pipeline where we have a 4-inch air valve. We took the air relief valve off and hooked up a 4-inch hose to a dissipator at the end of a pickup truck and flushed the pipe. And then this is the pipe completed. It was backfilled and new sod was placed where you see the nice green grass there. That is where the trench took place. And this photograph was taken on Saturday, December 9th. So that's my last slide. I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
I just wanted to point out, since I was there,
Uh-huh.
that hole was 10 or 12 feet deep.
It was 12 feet to the top of the pipe.
Yeah, 12 feet, and then they still had further below where they were working.
Correct.
So that was a really deep hole.
Questions? Impressive.
Nice shoring.
Thank you.
During this time, was the pipe operational, still with limitations, but was it still able to pass water from one?
Oh no. Just let me back up right quick. We did keep the pipe sealed up while the 5-foot section was being purchased and delivered. That took about 2 weeks. So we kept that just for sanitation reasons. We kept it closed, but it was out of service.
But when you say but the damage to the pipe from the earthquake had not fully taken the pipe out of service. We were still using
it was just leaking. That is correct. And I wouldn't use the word earthquake. It's earthquake
seismic
creep. And
the
so
seismic creep.
So the fault moves a few millimeters, or actually I don't recall, but it's very small, maybe 1 millimeter a year. But over a number of years, this pipeline has been in service since 1983, if I recall, 83 or 84. And so over some 30 plus years, 33, 34 years, there was enough compression to cause that leak.
Now, we did have a number of seismic fault crossings that would allow us, as a result of a seismic event, to be able to stay in operation. We did not have that on this and do not have that type of protection on this pipe now.
Okay, yeah, actually, let me see if this shows it. So what you're looking at here is the Shin Historic Park is on the left across the street. Ridley Drive is on the right. We have vaults that are behind the photographer. So behind my back, we have a vault that's on the the west side of the fault, and then a few blocks in the foreground, or from the picture would be the background. We have another set of vaults where we have dual 12-inch pipe connections, so we could string 2 12-inch hoses across this particular fault location. But remember, this is for raw water line. This is not a treated water distribution line. This is a raw water transmission line that connects the 2 well fields.
Right.
But we do have those emergency fault crossings at this location.
And 2 12 inches would be far less capacity than 36 inches.
Oh, much, much less. And so this, having those emergency connections provides us operational flexibility after an earthquake. We would have to decide whether that's how we'd want to operate.
And you have valves at either vault.
Correct. Correct.
Thank you.
I have a couple of more comments here. One, I saw the section of pipe that was taken out, and it's not to me clearly depicted here, but the broken seam in the pipe went nearly all the way around the pipe.
Correct. The compression, that bulge, went all the way around the pipe.
And I was seeing the metal gap that was there as well. And it was, as I said previously, quite a sight to see. There was something else that I was thinking about after looking at the work, which was, first of all, when you're looking that deep into a hole, and I've looked at other excavations where they're repairing a pipe in the middle of your street or something. This was quite different. And you almost have a vertigo effect when you're looking straight down that hole. So we had gone through some trench safety exercises in the last year, and that came to mind when I was looking at that hole, and or the excavation. And I was wondering, how exactly did they shore up so well all 4 sides their workspace?
What they used in this location was what's called a shoring box. So,
Because it looked really secure.
yes, they are very secure. These are stackable. They come in different sizes, both in widths, and depending upon the depth of the excavation, you have larger diameter struts that bridge between the both walls on either side. But these come out in pieces. They're assembled on site, and then after the hole is, in this case, because the ground was firm, they were able to excavate the hole, or excavate the trench, and then slide this shoring box in place.
And how were they able to excavate so far below the pipe without damaging the pipe? I was curious about that too, because it was completely flat on the bottom.
Well, they do that by hand. So there's men with shovels, and they do that by shovel, and they have hand spades. There are pneumatic hand spades. They look like jackhammers, essentially. And if the ground is hard, they can use that spade to move the ground, make it a little bit easier. But it takes a few men with shovels to dig out underneath the pipe. That's all done by hand.
Very interesting to see, and thank the contractor for all the good work.
Well, it was a team effort. Our crews were out there as well, supervising the work, as well as doing the disinfection, the flushing, and putting the pipeline back in service, and also in coordinating the work with our operators in coordinating the turning and shutting of valves and turning on and off the wells to flush and put the pipeline back in service.
Yeah. Thank Robert Els and Mike for giving me the opportunity to see all of that.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other item on the...
I have a couple of other quick general manager reports,
Please.
If that's okay. As the board is aware, ACWD...
Can we wait for Director Akbari to come back?
Oh. I'm sorry.
You've been summoned.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. As the board is aware, ACWD is a member of an organization called Baywork, and I wanted to share some recent publications from Baywork. As you know, we leverage Baywork to assist us in recruiting especially trades workers. These are folks like electricians, instrument technicians, water treatment and distribution system operators, utility mechanics, those kind of positions at the district, which tend to be more challenging to recruit the highly qualified candidates that we need to do the service that we do for the community. So because we are a member of Baywork, I just wanted to show you some of their more recent publications, and their website is excellent as well. And they also make videos where folks explain what they do for a living, and some district employees are actually featured in some of those videos as well. So that was the first item I wanted to share. The second one is recently Mr. In was appointed effective November 1st to be a member of the Board of Directors for the State Water Project Contractors Authority, or SWPCA, and he represents the South Bay contractors, and Mr. In had a few additional comments that he wanted to share about that position.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Just to give you an overview of what SWPCA is, it's State Water Project Contractors Authority. It's a JPA, or a Joint Powers Authority, and it consists of 22 California public water agencies that have contracts with the Department of Water Resources for water supplies made available by the State Water Project. So actually on the board of directors there are 9 directors, and each director has a term of 1 year. And the purpose of SWPCA is to provide services to and to operate and maintain through contracts with the state portions of the state water project, and to acquire, construct, own, operate, maintain, and replace facilities, to acquire water and water rights, and to do all the acts needed in order to provide for the development and delivery of water from the state water project to contractors. So most of their functions are done through agreements with DWR, member agencies, and others, and they undertake specific projects for the operation and maintenance of portions of the state water project. Currently there are 2 specific project committees, and ACWD is a member of both committees. The first one is the Municipal Water Quality Investigation Specific Project Committee, and that function is to perform supplemental water quality related services with DWR and to ensure that work is completed in a timely and cost-effective manner. And our own Lyda Hakes is the chairperson for that committee. The second one is called the Delta Specific Project Committee, and that one, the main function right now is to provide funding to the state and federal contractors' water authority, and they're responsible for developing and supporting programs to produce robust science and habitat restoration projects that improve the Bay Delta ecosystem and ensuring an adequate, reliable, and high quality of water supply. So with this responsibility, I'd be happy to receive any tips from the board on how to be an effective board member.
Well, will we be bringing this issue to a committee, perhaps?
Yeah, as topics come up, because one area that may come through this committee is California water fix, but that is to be determined.
So, because this item is just informational, we weren't necessarily planning on getting into a lot of discussion this evening, but just to basically let you know that Mr. In's spare time is going to be further used by involving his involvement in protecting the district's interests, and then if there's further interest, we'd be happy to bring additional information to committee and or the board.
Are you the representative for the South Bay Aqueduct, or are there other South Bay Aqueduct contractors on the board?
Yes, that's correct. So all the members are divided into classes. One of the classes is the South Bay Aqueduct. So I'll be representing SBA.
The 3, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
So one last item for the board, and that is, as you are well aware, each year ACWD employees assemble raffle baskets, which they solely fund, and we hold a raffle. And I'm happy to report that the raffle was held today here at the district, and a number of baskets were awarded to the lucky winners who purchased raffle tickets, as well as we auctioned off a few items. And we collected about $4,400, which will be donated by the Employees Association to local charitable organizations such as the Tri-City Volunteers, Alameda County Community Food Bank, Life Elder Care, and so forth, as they determine. So local NGOs that do well in our service area for the community. So the board itself, as your pocketbooks tell you, donated a basket, which was also raffled off for $500 and some other goodies in it. Thank you very much. We raised a significant amount of money this year, and I just wanted to let you know that $4,400 is going to where it's needed in the community.
Thank you.
And that's all I had.
Okay. Mr. Shaver, I have one item.
Oh, okay.
One additional item. Just wanted to review with the board that there are 2 similar requirements that require the district to test for lead in the drinking water of schools. A state Division of Drinking Water permit amendment and a new law, AB 746. So today, staff learned that last Friday, the Office of Administrative Law, Regulatory Notice Register, it states that on November 15th, 2017, the State Water Resources Control Board rescinded the permit amendment requiring community water systems to test for lead in the drinking water of schools. The board may recall that on January 17th, 2017, the State Water Resources Control Board issued a statewide permit amendment requiring voluntary testing for lead in the drinking water at schools. However, it appears there is conflicting information on what was said and what was not rescinded by the Office of Administrative Law, and staff is collaborating with other water agencies and are in the process of obtaining clarification. It is also understood that the State Division of Drinking Water will be issuing new FAQs on the compliance with AB 746 regarding the mandatory testing for lead at schools constructed prior to January 1, 2010, sometime later this month, but hopefully before January 1, when AB 746 becomes effective. I just wanted to keep you informed.
Thank you. My apologies. So to be continued.
And just correct. My understanding was that the lead issue was addressed long before 2010. So 2010 is somewhat of an arbitrary number?
That was set by the California State Legislature.
Right, but the practical issue where they stopped using lead in water supplies at a much earlier date.
I have no comment.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you. Is that completes the general manager reports?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it does now.
Item 7 is director's comments, reports on meetings attended, and agenda item request. Item 7.1 is Director Sethy and Weed attended a South Bay Engineers meeting on November 3rd. Director Sethy?
You want to start off or me?
I'll let you do.
Okay.
I'll say amen.
So, we attended a South Bay Engineers meeting on November 3rd. It was an excellent presentation. We had a number of our engineers there at the meeting. And the subject was on the impact of the high rainfall that we had last year on construction activities, specifically targeting in on stormwater, sewer, and transportation projects that were ongoing in the Bay Area, and how this interrupted projects that had been long scheduled and mapped out in terms of timeline. In terms of water and water policy here for the district, and I think our engineers came away with the same learning experience. One of the key things I learned was how to properly manage your contracts and the due diligence that a board needs to go through before they approve these types of contracts. And it seemed very relevant to me in terms of what we'd gone through with our rubber dam replacement project and the deadline to get that done within a certain period of time before we hit the rainy season, and some of the interruptions that we had on that project and delays. And so it was, I thought, a very thought-provoking session that we had.
The organization itself is worth commenting on. They meet generally on the first Friday of each month. Beth Gentry on our staff is an officer in the organization, and it brings together a number of engineers in the general South Bay meeting within Fremont and Pleasanton the season, and it's worthwhile. Thank you. Next item is 7.2, report of Director Sethy and Weed on the November 15th California Water Commission meeting in Sacramento.
I'll start off on
Please.
that one. That way, and 3 this way. There we go. So, Director Weed and I attended the California Water Commission meeting on Wednesday, November 15th in Sacramento. There were 3 key things on the agenda that we were there for. One was the preparatory briefing on the WISIP program, the scoring and determination. I've provided you with a handout here on, which is a nice summary of what's going on the latter end of 2017 going into 2018 on the decision-making process for the projects that will be funded under Proposition 1. Second, there was also a very good update on the State Water Project, taking a look at Oroville Dam all the way through the system. It was looking at issues of reliability, where they have to do rehabilitation and maintenance, really expanding on what the real costs are to upgrading the entire state water project. And we can hear numbers like $1 billion for Oroville, up to that, but there's at least another $1 billion of work that needs to be done where the levee, the canal system is going out of whack, subsiding, leaks are being created, there's a lot of water loss, power plants need to be upgraded, pumping stations need to be upgraded, there's all kinds of issues that they're dealing with. Lastly, there was a very interesting discussion about the late submission of some materials for one of the proposed WISIP projects, San Joaquin Valley Water Infrastructure Authority, and that tied in with the Temperance Flat Reservoir. I will let Director Weed entertain you with what happened under that discussion because it was really, really fascinating.
Wow. Okay, thank you. Well, on the report, first of all, there was presentations by DWR, particularly looking at the California Aqueduct and the subsidence impacts that had occurred due to overdraft of the groundwater basin, and how they were going to have to do some major reconstruction along the California Aqueduct, and how loss of capacity due to changing of slopes, and 3 areas where they had significant subsidence. The issue that, or the point that Director Sethy was referring to, I believe, was a staff report on how to handle the late submission by the Temperance Flat proposal, and they had additional data. The report was bizarre in the sense that it made a recommendation, said you can accept this, but you're going to violate all the principles and guidelines, and they wrote that as a motion. We would accept the violations. So it came up for 8 members were present. And after hearing the presentation, 1 member of the board voted to support the staff recommendation. There was no second. Then that was followed by a motion to do just the opposite and accept the submittal as submitted. That did not receive a second. At this point, the executive director of the California Water Commission came up and said, I've got a harebrained idea. Let's handicap that and change the whole scoring mechanism. That fortunately was shot down, and finally a sound and logical motion was made that got 6 of the 8 votes, which was to accept the raw data that was being presented so that the Commission would have the appropriate information to make their calculations, and not accept the cover letters and memos that were being included that were additional arguments in favor of the project, but they did accept the data. It reflects a remarkably, my experiences there, a curious and somewhat dysfunctional operation of the allocation of the water resources, water storage investment program, where water storage was, at the request of environmentalists, was deleted as a primary criteria in the allocation of the monies. This is for public benefit, and clearly water storage benefits people, not the public. Only in the environmental world.
If I may, I would like to give an update for yesterday's California Water Commission
Please.
meeting because it's timely, and I would prefer not to wait until next month. So, the key thing that was going on in November at the California Water Commission was a presentation by staff, by DWR, on the WISP scoring and determination system. And it was, it's a very detailed scoring system broken out into 4 parts. So I attended yesterday, and along with Thomas Nizar from our staff, and I stayed for most of the day. They started at 9 a.m. They were going until late in the evening. They were going to go as long as it took to get through all 11 proposals. So I stayed, I heard the first 3 presentations, including the one on Los Vaqueros Reservoir, and Thomas presented on that as well. And then I stayed around to hear the 2 largest presentations of the afternoon, Sites Project and Temperance Flat. There were about 120 people in the morning by my count, and in the afternoon there were at least 200 packed into the boardroom. There were, in the afternoon session, we had at least a dozen state legislators. We had mayors and former mayors. We had Board of Supervisor members from multiple counties, city council members. There were a lot of elected people in the room, and a lot of the elected spoke directly to the commission. My own impression was that the Los Vaqueros Reservoir expansion project really was one of the best received projects of the ones that I heard, and that was because we had lots of partners to showcase, and we had, or I shouldn't say we, Contra Costa.
We're a partner.
Yeah, had lots of partners to showcase. Number 2, there was very little opposition from the environmental groups, and there were a lot of environmental groups speaking out on each one of these proposed projects. So there was a map that was provided to Judy and I, Director Huang, when we had a meeting with Contra Costa Water District at Aqua, and I just wanted to let the other board members see this because it really shows you the extent to which there are so many beneficial partners all the way down the west side of the San Joaquin Valley that will benefit from the expansion of the reservoir. We think of it as a local Bay Area project, but when you start to look at the number of project partners, and ACWD is number 1, and going down the list, and then the potential for additional partners that they're looking for, this could be in the dozens here. I'd like to leave that map with Ms. Heides, if I may.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll also include a copy of it in the meeting minutes itself for the board meeting, as well as the other handout that you provided.
Yeah, this is a really nice, it's the best map I've seen of the system. I'd like to close with some thoughts here, because next month DWR is going to be doing their initial scoring on the first element that they're measuring of the 4 parts. And I read through each one of the detailed project presentations. One of the observations I had was that, and hearing the presentations firsthand too, was that everybody had difficulty in quantifying and trying to monetize the ecosystem benefits of their project. We thought it would be difficult for ourselves on Lake Del Valle, but it became apparent in reading through the project materials and then hearing the presentations that was a real challenge for a lot of people. Even more so was quantifying and monetizing the overall public benefits. And that's what they're really funding on.
Right.
So the thing that they're funding on, everybody is feeling really weak in terms of how they're measuring things. I did talk with Dave Boland, our legislative analyst from Aqua, who was sitting next to me, and we were kind of talking on breaks about what was going on. I totaled up all of the ecosystem benefits from all 11 projects, and you could fund all 11 and still have a lot of money left over. So I think it's really going to come down to whether each project has merit. I thought the very last presentation, which I was not there for, but I read through the handout, was the Centennial Reservoir Water Supply Project up by Auburn. Was a pretty weak submission. But I thought that the other smaller projects outside of Sites and Temperance Flats they all had some good beneficial reasons for moving forward. I don't want to be discourteous to our neighbor, Santa Clara Valley Water District, but I was just listening to others around the room after their presentation, and while they have had a very thoughtful presentation, what it lacked that the other presentations had was partners. That there were, it was like the project hadn't gotten far enough along for them to demonstrate who the other beneficiaries of the project would be. But still, I like the idea for the Pacheco Reservoir expansion, so I hope at some point that kicks off. And let's see here. I thought the Sites project presentation was excellent. The one that was presented afterward, I hope gets funded. That's the South Sacramento County Agriculture and Habitat Lands Recycled Water, Groundwater Storage, and Conjunctive Use Program. It sounds complicated, but I can see a lot of benefit and bang for the buck on that program. Temperance Flat, to make a pun here, I thought they fell a little flat, despite rolling out all the elected people and filling up the room. I felt that their weakness was that they really had not defined the system and the benefits of who would benefit from all that water. It hadn't been thought out all the way down the line. There was still a lot of work left to do, and it seemed like they were scrambling, apparently even last month. That was one of the discussions. But they still seem to be in a scrambling mode, whereas the Sites project was just, I thought it was excellent what they put together. So those are my comments on the 2 Water Commission meetings.
Just a side note, Temperance Flat is not going to be a Temperance Flat. Temperance Flat is an area which is just north of the Bryant Reservoir. decided that's not going to work for a variety of environmental reasons. So they now want to put a 600-foot dam in the middle of the Fryant Reservoir, and they've kept the name, but relocated the project. It changed it dramatically, only in California water. So we have one more item, which is the reports from the board members on the trip to Anaheim for the Association of California Water Agencies. Director Huang, come on down the road.
Sure. Actually, I found this particular meeting to be useful, probably more than some of the previous ones I have attended. My attended session on recycled water is actually a very fair view on the pros and cons of recycled water, possible pitfalls, issues with fundings. It's good to hear from people who experience working on these projects. And I'm also happy to hear that the state is working on direct potable reuse regulations, because that probably is the only way that recycled water would ever pencil out for us. I also attended a session on the water plan update that is near and dear to everybody's heart, because this is where we could potentially be tasked with collecting money to help build infrastructure for other areas. This is where it's near and dear to my heart also, because it's a fairness issue for our customers. It is good to have a two-way dialogue with the state. The state representative was there, and he seems to be open to suggestions from the water district representatives that are there. I think what we are asking for is for the state to hear us out, to understand that each region is different, and you cannot have a one-size-fits-all process for the entire state, because we are unique in how we govern ourselves, in our issues, even in our demographics. So I think I came away a bit happier. It seems like the state is open to discussion and have a dialogue with us. Then I sat in on the session on Prop 218 in social media age. That was quite an interesting session. I went in with the intention of learning something new, a new way to reach out to our customers when we do our Prop 218. It turns out to be a bunch of case studies and lessons learned, and I came out with, we did that, yeah, we kind of make that mistake, and oh yeah, we make the same mistake, and we already know we're not going to do that. So basically, we seem to have tried and done almost all the recommendations, and unfortunately, we also have made some of the same mistakes, which we promise we won't repeat again. Let's see. And then I sat in a session on low-income assistance rates. The issue for our district is this. We have people we have customers that, as I have alluded to earlier, that are on fixed income. They have very limited cash flow, yet they are not under the federal poverty guideline. And this is, once again, we need to protect our interests, our customers' interests. We as a district don't really want to be put in a position of collecting a water tax for the government, at the same time forcing our customers who have cash flow issues to come up with these money to be shipped out the district. So it is something that Ron Davis is tracking for us, and it is something that I think we should follow closely as a district. And then, as Director Sethy has alluded to, we had a great meeting with Contra Costa County Water District. We pretty much updated each other on Los Vaqueros. We briefly talked about schedule and highlight the issues that we need to resolve, such as governance issues for each of the projects. So that was a great meeting. However, I do have one request. At the end of the meeting, we were giving that really nice map that Director Sethy has shared, but I believe they also referenced to the fact that that map will be updated soon, because I believe the partnership membership is changing. They might be picking up some more. So if there's a new updated map, please send it to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Gunther?
I attended several of the same sessions. However, I also went to the innovative rate structure session, primarily just to see what they were going to talk about. And they had some interesting concepts and ideas. I believe, if I remember correctly, I think Director Weed was in the same one with me. You know, it was more of a this is what they've done type thing, and in relationship to tiering in this dry year. It was interesting to see how they addressed that with supplies, demand charge covering. It kind of shows there's a lot of different things you can do with your rate structure within the guidelines of the law. I didn't necessarily agree with everything I saw up there. However, it's fascinating to see what you really can do. I went for the California Water Plan, and yes, the state gets involved and can ruin something that could be useful. Hopefully, they'll understand that taxing our ratepayers isn't necessarily the best concept to fixing the problems in the state. And several people tried to express that. We'll see if they get it. I don't know if I have much hope, but there's hope. The same with the low income assistance rate program. There were a couple ideas thrown out. Bottled water tax. Have the state franchise board run it. Oh, that's a good idea. So, you know, I didn't want to get depressed from that one. But actually, this conference, I came away, I was not totally depressed. I've been to some in the past where it was pretty depressing, perhaps maybe because we had water. I also went on the one with parks, the park and water bonds. And in general, I like the idea that there was money in one of them for Orville Dam. I feel that we should not, the state water contractor users should not be shouldering the entire burden of that project. That project has major flood issues and recreational issues in that area. And granted, they were impacted dramatically by the potential failure of the spillway. However, that area also benefits dramatically from that, and if the dam wasn't there, I'd hate to think what the flood situation would have been like during those storms. Everybody kind of forgot that. And so there is some money involved in one of them. The second bond, I see they really need to readdress their, in my opinion, their advertisement, how they sell it. The first thing on the project down there was something to the effect of environmental, social, equality investments. And effectively what it was urban parks. The next item on the thing was for money was urban parks. Well, if you combine the two, you have urban parks. And if you want to get the voters to vote for this, you're going to get quite a negativity line from 20% or so of that population at least if you keep that as one of your lead items. Just found that to be interesting, that they would put that in there and they broke it out. But I don't really think they had to. And I'm afraid they're going down the wrong line with this one because, you know, you want to get passage of this, but if you're going to portray this as a environmentally social, conscious bill, you really run the risk of alienating a large portion of the population. But if you just leave it urban parks, people will vote for urban parks. They may not vote for that other stuff. So it was just a fascinating thing to see. I also went to the movie, what was it, Beyond the Brink? I think it was. Fascinating, definitely had a agricultural bent to it, a different perspective. You know, if you could see it and understand it was political. They said it wasn't, but it was. But still, I mean, it brought up some interesting points. You know, I really love the pointing out of the Mediterranean climates and where in the world they're located. In fact, California is one. There's 5 of them, and you know, certainly the Mediterranean, but the South African and the Australian Mediterranean climates were very interesting to see that, because I saw the 5 and I'm thinking, what are they? And there it was. So I don't regret going to watch the movie, but I did find it to be a little agricultural bent to it. I think people should watch it.
Are you done?
I'm done. Yeah, okay.
So I attended all week, and on Tuesday, the first day, I attended a number of the committee meetings. I was most interested in the Water Management Committee meeting, and also went to the little bit of the Communications Committee and Membership Committee meetings. Just to let the board know, I put my name in for nomination to a couple of the state aqua committees. So we'll see what happens. The water management is one that I'm very interested in, and I've attended some of the meetings up in Sacramento just to get a flavor for how the committee operates and works. On Wednesday, I attended the statewide issues forum, which was Can We Close the Deal on California Water Fix? And this was the first time I had a really good overview explanation, and Tim Quinn was leading the discussion as the moderator, as to how they're moving forward on all the financing elements of California Water Fix and how they've broken it down. And despite threats of lawsuits, how they're moving forward and will keep moving forward in an earnest way. So, yes, there may be lawsuits that are going out 10 years or more, but the momentum on getting the financing in place and moving forward with the early elements of California Water Fix are definitely moving forward. So that was very interesting to attend. I also attended the same one, well, a couple of the communication ones on public affairs engagement, and then the one that Director Huang was talking about, which I found actually to be the most fascinating one, which was about how agencies are dealing with Proposition 218 and social media. And we could have been the one of the case studies at Aqua. But what I came away with was we're not an isolated district, that as social media has grown, let's say the opposition has to rate increases and rate discussions has kind of skyrocketed in terms of numbers of protesters and protests that are being filed, and that this is now occurring across the board, across the state of California. And so there were some very creative ideas on how to engage or not engage with certain members of the community. But the healthy takeaway for me was that the more education we do for our community, the better we are off as an agency. That it's really paramount. And one of the key lessons was that I made note of was that when you're going through a multi-year rate increase or multi-year Prop 218, during those off periods, that is the most crucial time to work on educating your community. It's paramount. So I attended the session that Director Gunther did too on the 2 state bonds, and I'd like to close on that because first of all,
on the $3.5 billion bond, the one that's been passed by the state legislature, SB 5, I'm in agreement with Director Gunther. When I see investments in environmental and social equity with $600 million targeted and broken out that way, it gives me reservations. I think other people will feel reservations as well. But overall, I'm pleased with this bill, and so what I was looking for, and I spoke to the key sponsors of the bill that were present there after the session was over, what's in it for us, for ACWD? And one of the things that really stands out in SB 5 is there's a big chunk of money, about $1 billion. Oh, I think I'm mistaken on that. It's several hundred million dollars of the 3.5. 400 million is broken out for habitat restoration in all the fisheries and creeks. And I specifically asked whether Alameda Creek would be one of those opportunities, and was told yes, it's a prime example of as we put in fish ladders, we're going to have to deal with the other issues in terms of assisting, steelhead trout back up into the watershed. And one of those key issues is water temperature. So during the last couple of years, one thing I've really plugged myself into, Director Weed has too, we've gone on some field trips where we've looked at creek restoration areas that are where salmon migrate, steelhead trout. One of the best examples near us is Puda Creek, which runs from Lake Berryessa down into the Delta. And to see that restoration project was quite fascinating and shows us what the potential is for what we can do on Alameda Creek. So there's money for that. And in what I'll call Initiative X, the one that is driven by the signature process for next November's ballot, I also talked to the architect of Initiative X, and again specifically asked what's in it for us, what would benefit Alameda Creek. And in that initiative, there is $1 billion out of close to $9 billion that would be directly set aside for fishery habitat restoration. I'm that initiative, if it comes on the ballot, I will support as well. There's a lot in there that we can try to take advantage of in multiple ways. And there's also groundwater desalination opportunities, Bay Area regional reliability opportunities. And lastly, in both of these SB 5 and the initiative, I see opportunities as I read through the fine print where we could try to request money, go for grant. Both the SB 5 and the initiative give us that opportunity. So I'm looking forward to both passing, and we'll look forward to bringing more grant money in. That's it.
So if I may, I do have one takeaway from the 218 session, the Prop 218 social media session. and I would actually like staff to take this to heart. I think the takeaway lesson is that our message has to be clear, concise, and easy to understand. Write it at a great level that most of our customers will understand, and not only it has to be legal, it also has to explain where all the money, all the increases are going to. Be precise. And I think that's a very important lesson for us. That is something that we heard back from our customers at the rate hearing. So I would ask and encourage staff to strive for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I went down a couple days early for the Joint Power Insurance Authority, Joint Power Insurance Authority of Aqua, which I'm the representative of this board. We get part of our insurance from that and part from the Special Districts Drama organization. JPIA, based in Roseville, is a remarkably effective organization by meeting extraordinary standards and do well. They're now looking at a more innovative approach to have a captive insurance agency or company, which they would be the sole owners, incorporated in Utah. They had a choice between Vermont and Utah-based state laws, feeling that that would give them a ability to reinvest their funds at a higher rate and avoid some of the restrictions you have in the funding of and the investments of your proceeds in under California law. We'll see. They have essentially captured the market for water districts, and so my recommendation and discussions afterwards was that they do get extra money. You don't need to lower your rates. You need to capture as much umbrella insurance as you can, because they currently have about $50 million, and they could use a couple of zeros on that easily if they want to really respond to and have response in an earthquake or a major catastrophe. The conference itself was interesting. It's interesting to see how each of these funding proposals coming forth either have a social justice element, which is the water tax, using that as an argument to take money up to $1 billion now from the water company and give it to the state to be redistributed. One is AB 401, which is the economically disadvantaged, and the other would cover environmental and other programs. It's also interesting to see, as with the bond issues of the California Water, how little of this money is really going for water supply and water storage. It's going into environmental issues which have a bottomless pit of funding. If you look at one of the examples, we had an opportunity to visit up in Sonoma, the Dry Creek, about over $10 million a mile for restoration of the creek. Over $100 million for the 10 miles of creek. And they've brought in a few fish. And they've built a bypass for the water. Replicate that 1,000 times in the state of California, and you'll find where the impetus is no longer to try and address the water supply issues, but to create artificial environments that and flows that never existed in nature it's the new goal. We've met our water supply criteria essentially in the state, and we can do that with some tunnels and water quality. On the Oroville, it's interesting that there was $1 billion in cost. That was my understanding, a failure of maintenance by DWR on the drains underneath the spillway, causing the water to back up, lift the spillway off the ground, and the impact to repair that will be $1 billion. On top of that, there's another almost $2 billion in insurance claims going against the state. Our share may well be 1%, which in that case would be another $30 million coming out of our ratepayers' hides. So I wish us well. It continues.
Okay, so I'm going to be the person with the last word. Again, I think we should be clear on the record that we talk a lot about water taxes and our objection to it, and the low-income assistance program that the state is coming out with. But I think it's important to let the record reflect that we are not objecting to the need of having a low-income assistance program, or that other communities in California needs clean water or need assistance.
Right. And
I think our objection is to the fairness of collecting that money from our customers through a form of water tax.
One, I think it'll, by the state trying to run, one, it's an embarrassment to the state that we allowed this to occur at all. The water industry should have addressed it and ignored it. Second, with the state coming in, I believe it's going to be like a really bad charity, where the amount of money spent administering the program is going to greatly dwarf whatever benefits might filter down to the various communities throughout the state and our own potential ratepayers that might need it. And hopefully our goal would be we would have a system where we could meet the requirements and be exempted from it, but realize the real issue is funding a bureaucracy in Sacramento. A secondary effort is to do some good for the disadvantaged. That's my take.
Okay. We
do
have
have
a
any-
ceremony.
Yes, we have to do this.
That's right.
Picture time.
All right, let me take it. You have the control now. There we go. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So,
I'll do my best to, first of all, I appreciate the confidence of the board, and I will do my best to serve both the board of directors and the district as well as I can.
Okay. You can adjourn.
so would you do the honor and call the meeting
The
adjourned?
meeting now that you've taken over?
Okay. That's a long enough handle there. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.